So a few days ago, Jamie Dimon, of all people, decided to have quite an interesting statement where he basically just said that Gen Z has no reason to be depressed. As long as there's no nuclear war, they will have an unbelievable life. Um, yeah, this is quite an interesting statement and definitely spits in the face of a lot of Gen Z and even some millennials to some extent. So I really do want to cover this because this is a little bit disingenuous, if I do say so myself. Of course, I'm going to give you guys reasons as to why I believe this is completely the opposite, and I'm actually going to play devil's advocate at the end because this could be one of two things. Now, with that said, make sure to like, subscribe, comment. It really does help with the algorithm on YouTube as well as Rumble. Make sure to follow us on X at Fatal Investing. And of course, if you'd like to join us on Discord, which is the best place to catch the videos, the live streams, and the shorts, the link to this in the description below. So with that said, let's get started with this video. So let us actually read this article. We got JP Morgan CEO remains optimistic about the future for young generations, believing that advances in technology and the mass great wealth transfer will help Gen Z and Gen Alpha live longer, more prosperous lives despite current financial struggles such as unaffordable housing, and job-related costs. Dimon urges young people to focus on personal growth, hard work, and maintaining well-being. So there pretty much he summarizes exactly the reasons as to why Gen Z isn't optimistic about the future. In fact, let's start off with the first one. That is, of course, the great wealth transfer, which I've shown this graph before, guys, and that is, of course, this one, the wealth by generations. And if you guys have already heard me talk about this, then okay, so be it. I'm going to mention it one more time, just so that way, if you guys did not know about it, here it is. So we got this graph over here that basically depicts wealth by generation, and we can see that baby boomers are definitely all the way at the top at a whopping $76.2 trillion. And next would be the Gen Xers at $37.8 trillion. Then would be the silent generation at $19.7 trillion, and then the millennials at $13.5 trillion, and Gen Z is nowhere to be found. However, there's one specific thing here that is actually goes against the whole thing of the wealth transfer, and that is the fact that in every single instance when you do have some form of wealth transfer, it is through a recession. So you guys can see right here in 2007 2008 we saw obviously the housing crash recession, and what did we see? Both Gen X and boomers had a small dip and then just a massive rise up, while the silent generation actually did go down, which shows the wealth transfer right there. And then if we actually do take a look at the millennials, we can see once again another piece of wealth transfer the moment that we had COVID. That's when their graph went exponential, as you guys can see right there. However, right now, there doesn't seem to be any massive recession coming because they refuse to let it happen. And by they, I mean the people in charge, the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, they refuse to have a recession, which is then kind of preventing Gen Z and even to some extent Gen Alpha to amass the wealth. Now, some of you may be saying, yeah, but once the boomers begin to, pass on, then they'll transfer that wealth over to Gen Z. The problem is that when it comes to that kind of wealth transfer, that would mainly go to the millennials, not Gen Z. Gen Z is still not the, unfortunately, Gen Z is not the kids of the baby boomers. If I'm not mistaken, Gen Z is actually the kids of Gen X, and Gen X still has a long way to go. So I don't foresee this wealth transfer happen anytime soon. And think about this as well too. Millennials are not babies. They are in their 30s already. And I believe the oldest millennial is somewhere in their 40s. And by that same logic, most Gen Zs are actually in their mid-20s. And yet we have still yet to see this wealth transfer. By the same logic, you can conclude that unfortunately, Gen Z will not see any wealth transfer at all just based off of the passing away of the baby boomers. The next issue that was mentioned by Jamie Dimon himself, of course, was home ownership. And this is a major sticking point because there's a lot of factors going on here that is really incredible to see. Now, I'm going to try to cover as many of them as I can, but we get over here Generation Z. This year, the share of Generation Z buyers and sellers aged 18 to 25 made up just 3% of buyers and 2% of sellers. They are entering homeownership with the lowest household incomes, and they are unlikely to be married yet or to have children under the age of 18 in their homes. Like younger millennials, they purchase older homes and other buyers. Now, most of you are saying, well, yeah, I mean, of course, that makes sense. You're just starting off. You don't expect to buy, the biggest house ever. I fully agree with that. The issue with this is that, guys, most Gen Z is already in their 20s. And what do we see right here is that unlikely to be married or have children. This was not the same thing that we were seeing back with the baby boomers. So I just decided to ask Grok, what is the average age that each generation had their first child? And this is really astonishing because the silent generation had their average first child between the age of 20 and 22. That's crazy. Baby boomers 22 to 24, Gen X 24 to 26, millennials 26 to 28, and Gen Z, early estimates, we don't even have these numbers yet, 27 to 30. So the general trend here is that this is getting pushed further and further back. In fact, this is a trend all over the world, how millennials, Gen Zs are lowering birth rates around the world. With fewer people choosing traditional route of tying the knot and starting a family, it is not secret that the number of marriages and births are declining around the world. As a result, the fertility rate in the United States alone is a historic low of 1.7 births per woman, lower than the 2.1 births needed to maintain a stable population. This is catastrophic. Many countries are trying to tackle this by incentivizing couples to have children, but it seems the problem runs deeper. There's been a dramatic uptick in people refraining from relationships altogether and choosing to remain single instead. And here are a few points that summarize this. Women can be far more financially stable alone than once was, and this one right here, the second one, is actually the most horrifying one, which is the rising standard of living and new technologies contribute to a single life looking more attractive. Some men have fallen behind economically and even dropped out of the labor force, making it less attractive for marriageable in the eyes of potential wives. And the reason why this is important is because the standard of living has increased dramatically. And even though it has increased all over in all aspects of life, the one key takeaway is that when it comes to the median housing cost, this is astronomical. I asked Grok one more time, what median income would you need today to match the same buying power as 1970 to afford the median housing cost today? And it basically said that the median home price in 1970 was $17,000, where the income was $8,730, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. And once it did all the math, it basically said that in order to have the same buying power in 1970, you would need approximately $215,385 in 2025, where the median income, by the way, in contrast, today's median income is around $85,000 to $90,000. Then I just asked it, how much of a factor is this? And it is a whopping 2.46 times, which is just insane to think about. So on top of that, you have the possibility of just buying a house is not possible just by today's standards. I mean, who in the world, which Gen Z is making upwards of $215,000 in 2025 starting off in their first job? That's not happening. So this statement by Jamie Dimon, it is very, very disingenuous. And I don't know. I look at this in a way that, what kind of unbelievable life does he mean? Because it could be an unbelievable life in the sense it's just like you will own nothing and be happy. That's pretty unbelievable in a way, right? Or it could be an unbelievable life of like, you will live in a pod and eat the bugs kind of way. That's also an unbelievable life. So the way that most people take unbelievable, it could be in a positive direction, but it can also be interpreted in a negative direction as well, especially with the birth rates falling down to 1.7 per woman as opposed to the 2.1 necessary. So yeah, what kind of unbelievable life is he talking about? It depends. I'm pretty certain he looks at it in the positive, seeing that, of course, it does say optimistic future. However, the optimistic future would need to happen with a lot of negativity on the way in the form of housing crashes, we need recessions, etc., 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 in order for Gen Z to actually get ahead in life and to get up to the same level as even just Gen X. So that's pretty much all I want to talk about, guys. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment. It really does help her with the algorithm on YouTube as well as Rumble. Make sure to follow us on X at Fatal Investing. And of course, if you like, join us on Discord, which is the best place to catch the videos, the live streams, and the shorts. The link to that is in the description below. So with that said, peace out, and we will see you all next time.